The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/247 and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Must be 21 plus and present in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, permitted parishes only, Massachusetts, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, or Wyoming. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, or call 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York, or visit oasas.ny.gov/gambling. Standard text messaging rates apply. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Utah, and other states where prohibited.
Oklahoma reigns supreme as the Sooners beat up on Iowa State 27-21 and are now crowned Big 12 champions. It's the Sooners' 5th win in a row playing in the Big 12 championship game. Of course, they've won it each of the last 4 years, and then we go back to the last one before all the conference realignments in 2010 when the Sooners beat up on Nebraska 23-20 in that game. But ever since then, once the Big 12 started going to that championship again, it's been all Sooners. The story was the same on Saturday, like I said, as Oklahoma was able to get a win over Iowa State. We'll be talking about that game here on the 10 of 12 podcast. We'll also be getting into each of the 6 bowl games we've got coming up for these Big 12 teams, as well as our final 10 of 12 top 10 of the season. So welcome in here to the 10 of 12 podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gilbert. Good to have you with us today. Should be a fun show. Shouldn't be the longest show. Should be a pretty quick one here. There's not a whole lot to really dive into. We'll kind of brush over the Oklahoma-Iowa State game from Saturday, and then we'll also kind of brush over each of those bowl games as well as getting into those rankings at the end of the show. But we'll start it off here with Iowa State and Oklahoma. 27-21, like I mentioned, the final. Iowa State, man, I think that you're left a little frustrated here as Oklahoma gave you a lot of opportunities to go out and win this game. Unfortunately, Iowa State was unable to do that. Oklahoma picked up the win, and I don't know whose necessarily fault that is in the second half for the game getting close. If that's Iowa State just playing good defense and stopping Rattler in the offense, or if it's on the other hand, if it's maybe perhaps Oklahoma taking their foot off the gas towards the end of the game and trying to chew clock, and that I feel like it never works out. It worked out for Oklahoma. They get the win over the Cyclones. I'm not going to go through every little minor detail of this game. I'm sure that you were tuned in, and if you were not watching, then you're not really a true Big 12 fan, and the odds are that you're probably not going to be listening to this podcast. But Oklahoma jumped out to a 17-0 lead, I believe it was. And, it looked like it was all over from there. There's no chance Iowa State's even going to come back in this one. And they do. They make it a game. They, had the ball with, a minute left or so and had a real chance to go out and win the game. Like I said, they lost 27-21, which is a 6-point game. So a touchdown with that extra point, of course, would have won the game. So you've got to be. You had your opportunity there. They say it every week, I swear, in primetime when it's a close game. This is where leaders are separated from the average quarterbacks. I guess the elite quarterbacks are separated from the average ones. And not to say Brock Purdy's not elite, but he had a big chance here to prove himself that he is a top quarterback in the Big 12. He was the Big 12 quarterback of the year. I guess first team all Big 12 QB is the correct way to say that. But that the first QB in the Big 12 doesn't do that. They don't go and have their chance to beat a good Oklahoma team and go up against that defense and win the game in the final 2 minutes of the Big 12 championship game, right? The Big 12 QB of the year should go out and score a touchdown, right? That's just me, and I know that Brock Purdy was way more consistent than Rattler was this season. Rattler was really good over the last 6 games for Oklahoma, but you look at those losses to Iowa State and Kansas State, man, he was far from perfect. So I think I'm not saying that Purdy shouldn't have been first-team quarterback in the Big 12, but I think Rattler makes a really good case. I think it goes without saying Skylar Thompson, if he was healthy, would have had a shot at that being him. With him being a senior. Spencer Sanders goes without saying, if he's healthy, he's got a legitimate chance to do that as well. But Purdy does it. He gets it done, but he doesn't get it done against Oklahoma on Saturday. Taking a step back here, if we just look at these 2 seasons, frustrations for Iowa State, you've got to be thinking, if you don't lose that game to Louisiana, you've got a legitimate chance. And ceteris paribus coming into this game before it was played, Iowa State would probably be playing for a spot in the college football playoff, right? Think if you have one loss, and that's to Oklahoma State, and you beat Oklahoma in the regular season, you beat them in the championship game, you don't lose to Louisiana, that's really hard to put a one-loss Big 12 team to put them out of the college football playoff. But that obviously isn't the case. They lose that game to Louisiana, which is frustrating if you're a Cyclone fan, simply because you've got Ohio State in there who played half a game this year, and somehow the committee thinks that that's worthy enough of playing in the playoff. Now, don't get me wrong, I think Ohio State's a really good team. I'm not trying to say that they're not, but Iowa State's a really good team, and so is Oklahoma. These teams played non-conference games, though. I believe it was Missouri State for Oklahoma, and they played. That could have been a loss for the Sooners. We saw with Kansas State. They dropped a game to the Arkansas team, and then you have KU, who no surprise here, lost to with Coastal Carolina. So I think that there is a lot of reason to be upset if you are really an Iowa State fan. Obviously, I think 2 losses wouldn't get you in the playoff, even if you didn't have that Louisiana game. But still, you've got teams that are getting in who didn't even play a non-conference game. There's no chance. There's literally zero. They can't lose if you don't play. So, the Big 12 certainly got punished for playing these games. K-State would have been 5-4 on the season, 4-5. Instead, they're 4-6 because they played a non-conference game. They just wanted to play football. Same thing with Iowa State. Same thing with Kansas. That's just an extra loss on their, resume. So, I kind of got off topic there a little bit, but, frustrations for both teams, not only Iowa State, but for Oklahoma as well. This team is playing like a college football playoff caliber team, if that's the word you want to use for that. Don't get me wrong. I think that if they were to play Alabama or Clemson or Notre Dame or any of those teams, Ohio State in there, I do think that Oklahoma would lose. I do. But probably not by a lot. A big reason for me saying that is you look at Oklahoma's past in the college football playoff. They have not performed well. Let's be honest with that. So overall, though, I think Oklahoma would have given any team in there a fight with the way they're playing at this point in the season. Okay, when you have that game against Iowa State where you get off to the early lead, then Oklahoma really let off the gas and it kind of messed up their offense a little bit. Okay, if you look at, let's just say Oklahoma was playing Alabama and they got into it and it's an absolute shootout, Oklahoma would be toe to toe with them in a game like that, because they're not going to be able to hit the brakes. They're going to have to keep the pedal on the metal and keep it going to try to win that game. And I'm a firm believer that once you get a big lead like that, it really messes with teams. They don't stick to who they are. All they want to do is chew clock, and I get that. You want the clock to run down, but guess what wins you football? Points are points win you football. And it really frustrates me when teams let their foot off the gas. Same thing we saw with Iowa State and Oklahoma here on Saturday. But that's kind of a big rant from me. College football playoff is just it's better than people. I think people give it a little too much of a bashing. I agree. There's always going to be controversy. I agree that it's annoying seeing the same teams in there over and over. But I think the point that you need to bring up, and you can disagree or agree with me. I'm not saying you have to think this way. I just think more people should be made aware of the fact that college football in general is not supposed to be, you can lose 1 or 2 games and you're completely safe from the playoff, right? Or the bowl, the BCS, whatever it may be, right? What have you. If you go 8-2, if you're Oklahoma, guess what? You're in. If this was an 8-team playoff, you're in, because they were number 6 in the latest, rankings. So I don't like that, because Oklahoma lost to K-State and they lost to Iowa State. If you lose 2 games, unless everyone in the entire country has lost at least 2 games, you don't really deserve to have a shot at the championship. That's just my take. And if you agree with me, great. If you disagree, that's fine. But traditionally throughout college football, you lose a game, your season's pretty much over, right? And every game has that, intensity. College basketball is just such a different, animal, because you can lose, 10 games, 11 games, and you're still going to have a really good chance to go to the NCAA tournament if you can pick up 20 wins. So it's very different. Can you just imagine if, college basketball was just 4 teams get in, and then college football would be, let's say 32 teams get in, right? It would just be a completely different landscape. So I think that's the one thing. If you want to expand the playoffs so that your team can get in and have a chance, that's fine. The TV, everyone's going to make more money. I get that, but at the same time, you've got to remember, throughout the history of college football, the culture of it is that every game has to matter so much and has such a huge impact on the season. And if you expand to 8 teams, that takes away what that is. So, another rant for me there. I'm sorry, but I don't have much to say about this OU Iowa State game. Like I said, if you didn't watch it, the odds are that you're not even going to be listening to this podcast. So, we'll go ahead and wrap up the Big 12 regular and postseason, I guess, within conference play. 27-21, like I said, the final, as Oklahoma picks up the dub over Iowa State. Next, we'll go through here real quick and talk about our bowl games that we've got in the Big 12 Conference. Of course, we've got Oklahoma going up against Florida in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. That's on December 30th at 7 o'clock on ESPN. And then you've got Iowa State playing up against Oregon. That one's on January 2nd, 3 o'clock on ESPN in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. Oklahoma State's going to go up against Miami, Cheez-It Bowl, December 29th. 4:30 on ESPN. You've got Texas and Colorado, the Alamo Bowl, the Valero Alamo Bowl. I feel like I must add, or else I'm going to get arrested for not adding the full name. That one's on ESPN, December 29th at 8 o'clock. West Virginia, Tennessee, AutoZone Liberty Bowl. That one's on ESPN, 3 o'clock on December 31st. New Year's Eve game there. And then one last New Year's Eve game. We've got TCU and Arkansas. That one is on that one's on ESPN at 7 o'clock. I don't even know what that word is. It's the Texas Bowl. So 6 games. Of course, Kansas State had their COVID concerns and decided to shut down the season. Kansas, Baylor, and Texas Tech are not going to be dancing or bowling as well. So we've got 6 games here. I'll be honest here. I don't have much of an insight on these SEC teams. You've got 2 Pac-12 teams, and then you've got an ACC team in there. So I'll be honest here. I don't have much insight. I don't have much analysis. I don't know much about these teams. I place a few bets on the weekends. Maybe I'll throw 1 or 2 on, one of these teams outside the Big 12. But, as far as Oklahoma goes, we'll start out with this one because they're the highest ranked team. Florida, I've never been impressed with them this season. And that's just personally what I've seen. The little that I have seen of them, I have not been a fan. So I think Oklahoma's going to have a good chance to win that one. I think Iowa State's going to, have a really good game against Oregon. I did get to see that game against USC. So, believe it or not, we've got Iowa State's going up against a conference champion. Might I add, a Power 5 conference champion for that matter. So that'll be a good game. I think that will actually be one of the few, legitimate good games. Like Tennessee is playing West Virginia. Like what? Like Tennessee? What in the world is this? So I don't know if Tennessee was 3-8 or something this year. They did not have a good record in the SEC though. But Iowa State, Oregon, that'll be a great game. You've got basically a conference champion from the regular season and then a conference champion from the postseason in Oregon. So Iowa State, Oregon, that should be a good game. I don't know, and this is kind of always the case with bowl games, who's going to be motivated, who's going to want to play in a game that, does it matter? Sure, yes, but at the same time, does it really matter? Like, no, because it's not the playoff, but you get the point here. I think that both teams should be motivated. I watched Oregon. They were motivated. They beat USC. And same thing with Iowa State. I think they still want to prove people that they are a legitimate football program despite what some people are saying about them. So that'll be a fun one to follow. Again, that one, January 2nd, Iowa State and Oregon. Then you've got Oklahoma State and Miami. I mean, I don't know much about Miami either. I can't give much of a synopsis or whatever. I don't know if I can say much on the Hurricanes, but Oklahoma State, they're, a lot of people opting out with them, so I don't know how much firepower they're going to have, even though they've looked good with the backup running backs have looked solid for Oklahoma State. So we'll see what happens with them. We've got Texas and Colorado. I couldn't tell you anything about Colorado this season. I can tell you that Tom Herman's going to be back at Texas next season, and I don't know if I agree or disagree with that, but he'll be back. So that's a treat for Big 12 fans, I guess you might say. But again, nothing much to say about this one. West Virginia, Tennessee, I talked about it, man. West Virginia, if they just care a little bit, they'll be able to get a big win over Tennessee. And then last but not least, I think that the West Virginia game's probably the least important. But last but not least, we've got TCU and Arkansas. Again, I don't know much about Arkansas. I know that they're not the best team. Same thing goes with Tennessee, right? So I think TCU should have a decent chance to win against the Razorbacks on December 31st. I mean, those are the games here. Again, not going to dive into them, just kind of brush over those matchups. We'll take a quick break here on the 10 of 12 podcast. We'll come back on the second half of the show and go through our 10 of 12 top 10.
Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hosting friends for the big game. It's neck and neck in the fourth quarter, and suddenly you realize you're out of drinks. You start to sweat. Your friends start to turn on you. You're forced to go on a last-second drink run and end up missing the game-winning touchdown while in line. Terrifying, isn't it? Luckily, you can avoid the drama with Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your watch party. Compare prices across multiple stores in your area, find the best deals on game day drinks, and get back to armchair quarterbacking from, you guessed it, your armchair. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations. Is your January looking dry? Get some lotion. Get a humidifier. And better yet, get Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can compare prices across local stores to get the best price on a huge selection of drinks perfect for dry January. Every single time. Non-alcoholic wines? Have a look. Ready-made mocktails. Grab a straw and order them up. Beer without the alcohol? Yep, take your pick. You can find all of them here, in the app, in that phone that's in your hand. Could it be any simpler? Nope, not a chance. So shop for great deals on all your dry January beverages or other drinks and get them delivered to your door or blanket fort, maybe. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations. And don't forget to lotion up your elbows. They're looking a little dry.
Welcome back in here to the 10 of 12 podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gilbert. Second half of the show coming your way as we talk some 10 of 12 top 10, as we do every week here on the show, but this will be the last one of the season. We'll go through and rank each of the 10 teams in the Big 12 Conference. This shouldn't take too long. Like I said earlier, going to be a quick show. There's not a whole lot to say, but just a nice way to recap and end out the season. I think it's appropriate to go ahead and talk about these 10 teams in the Big 12. We'll start it off with Oklahoma. They win the Big 12 championship game. Therefore, I think it's hard to not put them at number one, even though Iowa State, had the same conference record when it's all said and done. Now, they still lost the game to Louisiana. They now split even with, the Cyclones and Sooners split evenly with 1-1 apiece. I think that you could make an argument for Iowa State at number one, just because I'm never a fan of, the recency bias and when a loss takes place. If that makes any sort of sense here. I'm never a fan of saying, oh, this team's better than that team just because, this team just beat that team. It's like, well, if you look at what they've done over the whole season, that's not true. But obviously, if we look at the last, like I said earlier, 6 or 7 games for Oklahoma, I think that they are the number one team in the conference, despite the success that Iowa State had. And don't get me wrong, Iowa State had a lot of success here in this COVID season. So I really, don't get me wrong with that. But when it's all said and done, I think Oklahoma, they had a better record overall than the Cyclones. Oklahoma just, I think, gets the nod there at number one. They looked really good in the second half of the season. And let's be honest here, Kansas State didn't deserve to beat Oklahoma. They made the plays, to set themselves up for victory, no doubt about that. But if Oklahoma just doesn't play stupid in that fourth quarter, they don't lose to K-State. And then we're talking about maybe an Oklahoma team that gets in, to the playoffs. But that's all water under the bridge. I think Oklahoma is the best team at this point in the Big 12. They're champions of the championship game, so we'll give them the nod here. Oklahoma's at number one. Iowa State's at number two. I touched on it earlier, man, but that Louisiana loss is just, you've got to be super frustrated with that one. If you're an Iowa State fan, you had a really good chance to do something special if that one didn't happen. But, Louisiana, I think I feel kind of bad for them because that's a really good football team down there that Louisiana has that, no one likes to talk about it because it's, the name, the brand, Louisiana, clearly that's not recognizable. But they've got a really good team, and everyone talks about, oh, Iowa State lost to Louisiana. No one talks about, oh, Louisiana beat Iowa State. It's always the fact that it's an embarrassing loss for Iowa State, even though it's really not, because Louisiana, like I said, a really good team this season. So that's number one. Number two, now we've got number three with Oklahoma State. I think that the injury bug, man, you've got to be, I wouldn't say frustrated because it's a part of the game and you've got to learn to play without it. But at the same time, man, Oklahoma State had a chance to do something special this season. They've got a good defense, but the three-headed monster they had on offense, man, that really had some potential. Nobody could stay healthy, it seemed like, especially, with Sanders, with Wallace. I saw him here in Manhattan when he was a healthy scratch, just standing on the sidelines. Pardon me, he was not a healthy scratch. He was a game time, prior to kickoff scratch. I beg your pardon on that. But, kind of just an season for Oklahoma State. They finished at 7-3, 6-3 in the Big 12. But I think that they had a lot more potential to do a lot better than that. They beat Iowa State. They got some wins in there. But still, 3 losses in conference play isn't good enough based on, the expectations that they had coming in to the season. Number 4 is Texas. I think that that's a really good spot to put them. They are not elite in the Big 12, and quite honestly, they're really not close to Oklahoma and to Iowa State. However, they're still a solid team, so I'll put them at number 4. I think this is a really good spot for them. Ellinger had a fine season, I guess. Herman, I give him a lot of credit as well. This is another team that we saw in Manhattan. And, K-State, I was very confident in the Wildcats to beat the Longhorns, just a few weeks back. And I asked the question, I've talked about it a few times here on the podcast. I asked the question, who do you think has more respect of his players, Tom Herman or Chris Kleiman? If you're going to answer Tom Herman, you're riding Texas in that game. If you think it's Chris Kleiman, you're riding K-State, right? And I think most people would probably agree that the answer to that question would be Kansas State. I was dead wrong. Texas came out, looked super impressive, hung up 69 points on Kansas State. A great performance, and that tells me a lot about Tom Herman. Okay, he gets a lot of, he gets a lot of heat for his job there, and the standard at Texas is very high. I get all of that, but that was an impressive performance, and I think that's very telling how much his team cares about him. The ones that were still there, because we also had a few safeties, I think, opt out for Texas before that game as well. So that showed me a lot. I think Texas is number 4. Herman will be back, so we are not going to be getting rid of him anytime soon here in the Big 12. Number 5 is TCU. They were on the come up here as they were, near the bottom of our rankings. Probably a month or so back, they won 5 of its last 6 games of the season, so a nice ending after kind of a weird start. They got the win over Texas as well, so but they beat up on KU, beat Baylor, beat Tech, so they kind of beat the teams that they were supposed to win. But they didn't really sniff anything against Oklahoma. So TCU, a fine season. I think number 5, they're right there at the middle of the pack when it's all said and done now, as we're nearing the end of December. The next game we've got here, next team, is West Virginia at number 6. I think it's very close to having them at number 5, but I think that overall, I'm not saying people got too high on West Virginia, because they didn't, because West Virginia is a good team. But with, I think that the success that Neil Brown had might have surprised people just a little bit there in Morgantown. So, TCU, people are saying, Patterson, is he going to get fired, blah, blah, blah. TCU went 5-4 in the Big 12, right? So they had actually, believe it or not, and this is really surprising, they had a better record than West Virginia did in the Big 12. West Virginia, of course, had that game postponed and then eventually canceled against Oklahoma. So they were 4-4. TCU, however, was 5-4. So, believe it or not, West Virginia actually, had a worse record than TCU. So I like the Mountaineers just one spot behind the Horned Frogs. Number 7, I like Texas Tech here. They're 3-6 in Big 12 play. Their season is over. Not much to say really about Texas Tech. They're at number 7. Number 8 here, Kansas State, a 4-5 mark in the Big 12 play. I like them down there at number 8. Asked me the same question back after the win. What was the last win they had? I think it was the KU win or the TCU win. I don't know. Their 4th win in a row this season. I think that was one of the best teams maybe in the Big 12, but the code was cracked. Deuce Vaughn was stopped. The offensive line, came back down to earth, and the wide receivers just really couldn't do much. Messingham's play calling, I think caught some criticism. So overall, things just kind of went downhill for Kansas State, and it was ugly. It was very, very, very ugly to end out the season. It was really surprising the way it happened, just because of how awesome of a start they had to the year. But there is good news. Skylar Thompson coming back next year for the Wildcats. I think that is very, 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 very good news if you're a Kansas State fan, and I think everyone agrees with me. There's no question about that. With Thompson, I think a lot of that kind of revolved around Will Howard. If Howard was good, and actually, let's say he won 2 or 3 of those last 5 games, that would put K-State at, 7-2 or 6-3. If K-State had a good, successful season and Will Howard was successful behind, under center, I think that Thompson's not coming back, because he's, and it's a two-way street here. The coaching staff wants him back, and Skylar wants to come back too, right? It's not just one or the other. Both of these parties are on the same page, and that goes for everyone who elected to not use that extra season. You don't know. Some of these people that, decided to forego that season, maybe they wanted to come back, but the coaching staff said, we need to get these young guys minutes, right? I think it's clear and obvious Will Howard is not going to get he'll get better next year if he were to play, but he's not going to get, immensely better. So Skylar's coming back. He realizes that they kind of really need him in Manhattan for a successful season, if things can get back to normal, knock on wood. Number 9 is Baylor, 2-7 in the Big 12. Nothing to say really about them. And then you've got Kansas down there at number 10. Again, nothing really to say about Kansas. they've been there for, I think, the entire year. So that's it. I mean, that is our final 10 of 12, top 10 of the year. What a season it was, man. A Big 12 football. We got it in. We had numerous cancellations along the way. I believe it was K-State, Texas Tech, and Iowa State are the three schools that didn't have a cancellation. They played all 9 games. I guess some other teams played all 9 games, but they had to, move the puzzle around a little bit to get that going. So, I mean, tip of the cap to the Big 12. I don't think we talk about it enough. We wouldn't have a football season if it wasn't for the Big 12. And I firmly believe that. The ACC, the SEC were in. The Big 10, the Pac-12 were out. The Big 12 was on the fence. And let's be honest here, it really did, lie in the hands of Bob Bowlesby. And he made the right call. I think that's clear. That's obvious at this point. As we're almost a year into this pandemic now, that it was the right call to play sports. There's going to be people that say, no, it's not safe, don't do it. And I'm sure, there are, arguments to that. But overall, man, no, to my knowledge, nobody, got, terribly sick or terribly ill from the virus. I think everyone that had it, they had the sniffles for a few days. And then that was that. I had it back in, August, late August, when everyone came back to K-State here. My whole house had it. I feel like everyone that I'm friends with had it pretty much at the same time, right when everyone came back. Within the first couple of weeks, it made its rounds through campus. And, that's a big reason for Kansas State's loss against Arkansas State was, K-State didn't have half their team, but there's no excuses in that. But, I lost my taste and smell for, a few days and was really, really tired for a day. And don't get me wrong, I've never been more tired in my life than I was. But other than that, I recovered fine. And I think that if you are a college athlete and you don't got anything, wrong with you, I think that it was it's good to play football. They were all given, the opportunity to opt out of the season. They're given an extra year of eligibility next season. So, I think that overall they did well. They we got through it. It's super funny to look at, and I'm 1,000,000% guilty of it. Every fan was saying, oh, back in August, if we can just get football, then I'll be happy. That's all I want is football. Doesn't matter if we win. I'll be happy with football. And then football comes around, and your team starts losing. You get all frustrated, and that's just the love of the game right there. That's the passion of the sport. Super. I'm just happy that we had a pretty full football season, in the Big 12. And I talked about it. I want to go back to that now. We would not have a football season if it wasn't for the Big 12. I mean, I don't think we'd have anything. I mean, if you have a majority of your Power 5 conferences not playing, then it's just not going to happen. You're not going to just have the SEC and the ACC playing. That's just not going to happen. No matter how much they want to play or not, that's just not a good look. You had the Big Ten who wanted to be the smart guy and say, hey, we're not playing. The Pac-12, just doesn't know what they're doing, so they just follow what the Big Ten does. Everything else, it was on the Big 12. And the Big 12 made the right call. I'm happy that we got a season in. I wish we could have had some more fans in there, but, we got to take what we can get during these times. But I appreciate your listenership, all throughout this season. This has been a blast. Basketball season is in full swing. I think we'll probably next week or the week after get really going with a weekly, talking a weekly scheduled episode of Big 12 basketball. I just got done with the, K-State played Jacksonville today. Feels good. I love basketball. It's a great sport. Feels good to kind of get that back going, in our world today with everything that's going on. So, be on the lookout for that. But, again, I really do deeply, I appreciate everyone's listenership throughout the past, number of months with this podcast. And if you've been listening to it for, it's been almost 2 years now since I've been doing this podcast. So if this is your first time listening, man, if this is your 100th time, I mean, I appreciate you, tuning in here. These are always a ton of fun to do. Other than that, I'm Ryan Gilbert, and we'll catch you next time.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.